Like any project, a good planning is essential to a successful garden, no matter whether it is small or big in size. This holds especially true if you're living in a place with a short growing season, then you have a small window of time to experiment and try out things in your garden. I hope this would be interesting to at least some of you and give you the motivation to plan out your garden if you have not done it yet. So let's start. My garden is south facing. The sun is coming from this direction. That means there is a lot of sun whole throughout the day during summer, which is good for growing vegetables, but at times it can get pretty dry and hot. It has three different areas. The first one would be the square foot vegetable garden, which is on the west side of the garden. This is where I'm planning to grow most of my veggies. The flower bed is right in front, which has three big rose shrubs and a lot of other perennials which are growing from bulbs. I wish to plant more flowers as the weather gets better. I won't be growing any vegetables in this area. And the third portion of my garden would be the containers and the raised bed on my patio. The raised bed, and I have two more big containers which I can mark it like this. Yeah, these raised beds and the two containers will be for growing vegetables. The vertical garden is where I'm growing strawberries and some herbs, and the long planter is dedicated for flowers. So the patio will be a mix of both. As I've mentioned in several other videos, this year I really want to try growing more flowers to make my garden more prettier and to bring some aesthetic interest to my garden. So that is how my garden is divided. So first we have the square foot garden bed, then the flower bed, and then the containers and raised beds on my patio. So that is basically it. This video is mainly going to focus on the vegetable garden part. I'll try to make a video dedicated on how I designed the flower bed because it is currently going through a makeover. Nothing big, but I thought a dedicated video will be better. So coming to our vegetable garden, this area has three big garden beds, which is of 120 by 80 centimeter each, and one small one which is around 50 by 50 centimeter, I would say. I practice square foot gardening, which is basically dividing the garden beds into squares. I find it easier to divide beds into smaller chunks and to get an idea about the spacing between the crops. If you want to know more about square foot gardening, I have a dedicated video on that. I'll link it here. As I mentioned earlier, the garden is south facing, so the sun is going from here to here all throughout the year, and the north would be this side. So ideally, all the plants that are taller, like chilies, tomatoes, beans, if they are grown vertically, should be on the north side of the garden. This is so that the taller plants don't cast shade on the shorter ones. For example, if we have a tomato here growing vertically upwards, then it will cast shade on the other plants and it will not get enough light. So that is why it is recommended to plant taller plants on the north side of the garden. I try to stick to it as much as possible, but since this area of my garden is southwest facing, it gets a lot of light all throughout the year, sometimes too much light. So I sometimes mix up things. I also grow taller ones on the corners to give it aesthetic interest. But if your garden is not south facing and you're working with not enough light, then you have to keep this point in mind that the taller plants should be on the north side of the garden. So let us zoom in this area. Let us focus on one bed first. So I have it already mapped out. So this would be bed number 1. I'll show you how to plant this bed, and then we will zoom out again and I'll show you the entire plan at a glance. So this would be bed number 1, and here is where the patio is, and sun is coming from this side, just that you know. And this bed is 120 centimeter by 80 centimeter in length. So it is divided into 4 squares in length of 30 centimeter each, and 2 squares of 30 centimeter each and a smaller square. Because it is 80 centimeter, it cannot be divided by 3. Yeah, the last row is smaller in size. And this bed is going to be a mix of flowers, herbs and vegetables. In this bed, I already have some plants growing from the winter. First one would be snapdragon. So this one was planted last summer. It gave me good blooms and I was just experimenting. I left it as such during the winter and now it is going to bloom again. It has already buds in it. So I leave it as such. I'm also planning to grow snapdragons in these 2 squares as well, so that the front portion of this garden will be filled with flowers. So let us plant that. And according to square foot gardening principle, you can plant 2 snapdragons in 1 square. the number of crops that each square can fit in can vary depending on the crop. For example, if it is a radish, you can fit in 16 radishes in one square. If it is spinach, it is 4. If it is a tomato, it is 1. So it really depends on the root space that each crop requires. So for snapdragons, it is 2. So I'll be planning 2 squares of snapdragons here. The first row will be filled with flowers. Then coming to the next row, again I have some more flowers in plan. So I really want to grow zinnias this time. So these 2 squares will be for zinnias. Since this is the front bed, so let me grab the other chart. So this is going to be my view from the patio, and this is what we are planning currently, this 2 rows. So this is the bed that we are planning currently. So here we have snapdragon. So when I look from here, I can see blooms right in the front. So that is what I'm aiming for. That is why I'm planning a lot of flowers in this bed, and also to attract pollinators. So flowers are really important for vegetable gardening. You cannot have a vegetable garden without flowers. So you need some pollinators, and to attract them, you should have flowers. So snapdragon is almost stuck at the corner, and there is only one snapdragon crop there. So what I'll do is the rest of the square and this square, I'll use it to grow some beans. So currently in this square, some beetroots are already growing. They also overwintered. Can you imagine that? They survived the frost. So in this bed, I'll be growing, since it's a half square, beetroot. You can fit in 4 beetroots. So yeah, I'll still go for 4 beetroots even though it is a small square. 2 of them are already growing from the winter, as I mentioned. I'll be sowing 2 more beetroot varieties here. And once the beetroot is done, I'll be planting beans. This is just opposite to what I said before, that all the tall plants should be on the north side. That is why I said I play around a little bit, because I want to have beans in this corner. So I'll be putting a trellis over here and trying to grow beans vertically. That is my idea. So I'll be using the rest of the space here and this square for beans. So let me also write beans here. So that will be happening later in the summer. Coming to the third row, the classic spring crop, I start with radish here. So that will be 16 radishes can fit into one square. This is what I like about square foot gardening, because you get an idea how many can go in one square, and you can just focus on one square at a time. That's really helpful. Radish will be done by end of May, and later on I'll be replacing them with a chili. So I have enough chili plants growing in my seedling station. So I'll be planting 1 chili here. So that will be just 1 chili. And then in the next one, I have pak choy. So I'm planting 4 pak choys here. So you can just Google how many crops you can fit in for each crop variety in a square foot. You will immediately get an answer. So that is pak choy. Once it is done, I'll be replacing it with Swiss chard. Yeah, so that will be 4 Swiss chard in one square. Again, same as pak choy. And then here in the spring, I'm planting coriander. Coriander will be done very soon. You can only grow till June at max, and after that they bolt very quickly. Then the square will be replaced by basil. Coming to the last row, so here I'll be growing some carrots. Carrots taken a lot of time to grow, so this will be there in this bed till July, August. So I don't have to plan a succession here immediately, and as and when the bed gets empty, I'll plant something spontaneously. So according to the gardening principle, we can fit in 9 carrots in one square. Here I'll be growing some beetroot. So here I'm growing 4 beetroot plants, and I'm also trying multi-sowing. So that worked really well for me last year, and this time also I'm growing more than a cluster of beetroot together. So not just one seed in each pocket, but multiple seeds. So that is beetroot, and once it is done, I'll be replacing it with eggplant. Then in the last square, I have some onions. So here I'm planting 6 onions. So this will be there in the bed till summer. So I'm not planting any successions here. That is my plan for one bed. So this is how I go. I make sure that each bed contains a flower. So in this bed there are a lot of flowers because, as I said earlier, I just want to make my garden also prettier. So this will be the front row and I want a lot of flowers here. So that is the reason why I plan many flowers in this bed. But ideally you just need one which can attract more pollinators like marigold or snapdragons or borage. Depends on what your interest is. But yeah, in this bed we have a lot of flowers. So each bed should have a flower, a herb, and the vegetables. Flowers will attract pollinators. Sometimes some of flowers will also attract pests, and it can act as a sacrificial plant saving your veggies, for example nasturtiums. Or you can also plant herbs. Strong scent of herbs will keep the pests away from your bed. So that is why I'm having coriander, basil, and even onions. Some pests don't like the smell of onions, and around it a lot of vegetables. So that is the main principle I follow. So this is how I plan a single bed, and how it is done and how it will turn out we'll see during the growing season. Zooming out, this is the plan for my 2024 garden. It is done digitally because it's easier for me. I use Draw.io app. You can use Excel or even a small Word document, Paint, whatever works for you. So this is the plan for the square foot garden. The same principles that I mentioned before has been used to plan it. I've also planned the raised beds, the containers, the big containers I have which will be growing tomatoes. Then this is the vertical garden where the strawberries and some herbs will be grown like lemon, mint and chamomile. Then I have the long planter which will be also for flowers, and the flower bed where already some perennials are growing. I'll also add annuals which I have not yet decided. This will be an area that I have to experiment. I go month by month so that I have an idea what needs to be sown, what is already growing in the garden. For example, in April I've sown a lot of seeds in my garden. So that is what you can see in black font, and all the gray fonts. These are the plants that are already in place in my garden which has overwintered, which I sown last fall, and all the perennials which are already growing in the garden. And here I have a chart of what needs to be sown indoors, what needs to be transplanted indoors, what needs to be sown outdoors. So as you can see, in April I have a lot, and outdoor planting as well. So likewise it goes for each month. I have a template for this, an empty template. It's not as extensive as this because your garden plan is different as mine. The skeleton with this table will be linked in the description below. You can download it for free, customize it however you want according to your garden size and plan. If your garden is big, maybe it will not fit in this single sheet, but you can get the idea and implement it for your garden. The garden plan can look different for each one of us depending on several factors like the amount of sunlight it receives, the direction in which the balcony or the garden is facing, but the principles remains the same. If you like this video, you might also like another video which I'll link it here, where I have planned a west facing shaded balcony garden, and you can check out what factors I considered there. I hope you got some ideas to plan out your garden. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next. Bye and take care.